Session for about 18 years now since I first met you.
Right.
Yeah. You were very young. I had no gray hair.
I have here.
I was at Nina. Ralph and I have been trying to go to Nina. I used to work, but Ralph and I used to go to Nina every few years. And we were at Nina, APCO fall meeting. If you don't go to that, I encourage every single one of you to go at some time. Gary's always there. David's always there. And the rest of you need to go there. The reason you need to go there is these are the people that make South Carolina a safe place to live. And without them, it's scary. And they think GIS is as important as we think it is. And they think we're smarter than we are. But I was sitting there last fall, and I was listening. In the second session I was in, I realized they are convinced in next generation that 911 is going to work flawlessly because GIS is going to be that good. And I sat there and I thought, this is scary. I don't think GIS is ready. It's not a lack of confidence in all of us. It isn't lack of confidence that we're all trying, but it's scary. Everybody and their brothers into the whole next generation 911. We're going to talk about that, and you'll discover more about it. Everybody's in it. You know what it is, right? You could stand up here and define what's next generation 911, right? Yeah. That is an actual place over on Clark's Hill Lake. This is the most practical explanation I could find anywhere. I think it's pretty good. Now, is that precise, accurate, complete? But that's what everybody kind of thinks it's going to be.
I'd like to point out something just on this slide.
Yes.
Because we can talk all day long about what we think, but it's what the caller believes when they dial 911. You know, if you've never had the opportunity to sit in your dispatch center, in your 911 center, you should. Because when the public calls 911 and we take away the resource that the 911 operator is accustomed to having, and that's the anti-alley database, and now we're doing it geospatially, that's when it gets to be real. Because all the tools that we've given them in the past, that operator in the past, is gone. Now the caller doesn't understand, because in York County, 76% of our 911 calls are made from cell phones now. So the old thing of I always know where you are, it doesn't. There's a lawsuit outstanding today against several of the larger cell phone providers over phase 2 911, which was the phase where they said that they would tell us where you are if someone dials 911. So now, next generation 911, we're going to need you to tell us. It's no longer the big provider, it's the local geospatial database that's going to be critical to what we need.
And we'll do a lot of because if you don't have any idea, this is one of those presentations that's going to be real good in about 2 more weeks. Okay? It's not there yet. All right. Regional 911 in South Carolina. This started somewhere in, I guess, the late 70s with some 911 centers and slowly evolved. But in one county, the directions most frequently heard were how do we get to your house? Well, you go down to the pink house and turn left. Even after the pink house burned. And there was never a time in that particular county when the people in the communication center did not know where they were talking about. Everybody in that county knew where the pink house was. I don't know what they used to do at the Pink House, but everybody knew where it was. But 911 started February 16th, 1968, Haleyville, Alabama, because the Alabama Telephone Company wanted to outdo AT&T. And back then, there was a great deal of local, and a great deal of telephone involvement, thinking we can do this. And at that time, there was very little federal involvement. E911, your call was linked, this is the anti-alley, your call was linked to a street location, more or less. Comes up on, in 911, 125 Glenway, no, wait a minute, the plant number, you don't need to know about plant number, 957-7048 is linked to 125 Glenway. Everybody need to know where that was. They had an idea. You know, they had some sort of a map, and sure enough, it's 2 minutes and about 45 seconds from the nearest fire station. A little over a minute from the nearest police station. It works. It's worked well for years. And beauty with the anti-alley system, the tabular database system, is you can change it at 4:55 on Friday afternoon. It'll work all weekend. Now, the world said that's not good enough. We want GIS integrated directly into 911. We're all part of that world. But we're fixing to find out how big a sandwich we bought into. Phase 2 came along, and cell phones, and I remember the first call we got on our cell calls, and we went into it feeling like we investigated, and the first call was, this isn't exactly where it is. Well, it wasn't. And then we started explaining cell call accuracy. But Enhanced 911, it hits a database with an MSAG, and you see that down there. That's what Gary's referring to. Right now, this system basically works. Doesn't work perfectly, doesn't work all the time, doesn't work for everything, but there's a sense of reliability. And if you're out there and you're in communications, and you're saying, well, now we're going to start using GIS, that's the scary part. That's where we've got to step up to the plate. Here's another way of looking at it. As long as you use a landline, how many of you got a landline? You don't have to confess it if you don't want to. But if you got a landline, you call 911, they got you if you use that landline. If you don't, that may or may not be a different issue. If you use a mobile phone and you call 911, they maybe got you. Now, next generation's gonna come up, we'll get to it. They maybe got you. Next generation's come along, and we're gonna add voice and email and text and pictures and video and stream. You know, the sky's the limit. And Gary and everybody else in communication, they're ready for all of that. And they're gonna keep the same number of people working, and they're not gonna have any problem with all this new communication coming in. You think? Everybody I've heard of where they tested any part of this other communication has to hire a new person and dedicate somebody just to keep up. Because can you imagine a school bus goes by and they see an hour, how many text messages get sent? And which one came first and which one's last and which one's had important information. Now, I don't know how you do a triage on all the pictures and everything. I honestly cannot imagine. You hope your 911 center's already using good maps, good pictures, you know, good information, good aerials to see what's going on. Who's pushing it? Well, there's at least 3 important people pushing it. The public absolutely expects it. Absolutely. FCC demands it. This is the biggest change with Next Generation 911 from everything else that's ever happened in 911. Everything up to this point, the federal government kind of was sitting back there going, yeah, this is a good idea. Yeah, that's good. This time, the federal government said, we want it now, this is what's going to happen, and you better get on with it. And they're gonna be pushing even more this month. They're pushing hard. In the world we live in, it's not hard to imagine that one of these days, the FCC is gonna say, we want it by July 1st or whenever. And then the questions are we ready? Is everybody else ready? NEMA and APCO are working on it, and they're working hard. Somebody, I don't know who, enlisted me to be on a point addressing standards group. And I thought, well, yeah, sure. Wednesday afternoons for an hour. Yeah, we'll do that. It's 80 hours on the committee, and we've been doing that for a couple of years now, and we're not through yet. And it started off as an hour, then an hour and a half, sometimes 2 hours, plus readings. It's been some of the hardest work I've ever done. Very frustrating at times. But thank goodness there's people like Gary on it, as well as people like me, as well as others, and we're trying to make it so it works. Public safety needs it. You talk to a deputy or somebody on in an ambulance, they want the best information they can possibly get, but they doggone want it right. Of course, TV and movies, it works flawlessly. It will be IP based. That's great. Everybody loves the internet. Nobody ever has a problem with the internet. Like last week, my home IP address got duplicated. I don't know who did it. I don't know where it got happened. I don't know. All I know is it took a while to get it fixed. All media you come up with is going to be part of it. But that's just one part. That's what's going to hit them. Not to pick them. I like Gary. Liked him a long time. Everything's going to hit them, and they'll have to communicate. At the same time, when the call comes in and the ambulance is on the way to the wreck out off Rock Arm Road, that the car had an accident, the car is already sending out the message. By then, Black Box will send out the message. This is the kind of wreck. These are the kinds of injuries that we would anticipate. The ambulance pulls up. That information's fed into the ambulance. The ambulance and the EMS personnel check the people and say, yep, yep, yep. And then the message goes to the hospital. Looks like we've got this, this, and this. And the hospital takes that information, calls in the surgeons that are needed immediately, and they're there when the ambulance pulls up. Now, is that fanciful way out there? No, that's not that far out. But we've got to do our part to make all that happen, or else the ambulance will be heading out to the wrong place. Everything's GO&A. Tim Detroit always got, he's a state GIS guy, right? All he's got to do is make it happen. If there's any problem, Tim, right?
It'll be my fault.
Good. All right. Anybody want to talk about how it works for location? Look up.
I'll let you take that.
All right. Right now, it hits a database. It's going to be, and this is a little scary. The call comes in, and you say it's a cell call, because that's what most of them are now. And it's going to say, here's where it is. Is it going to give an address or is it not? Some vendors right now give an address, some don't. What address does it give? Well, if this is in the middle of a hayfield, what address is it going to give? Some of them say, well, we use the nearest one. Some use other parameters. That scares me. I don't like that. I want to know where it is. Some of them say, well, we're accurate. Really? Nobody else is. I'd like to know how you can be accurate. You got standards. Nina is working on standards, and I'm just on a little bitty small area with Nina standards. There are half a dozen groups or a dozen groups working on standards, and it's exhausting just trying to keep up with all the changes, but working feverishly trying to, this is the way it's going to be. Address points, how do you do it? There are people on this work group who insist that where they live in their county, they're tickled to death to have partial centrals. I don't want my grandchildren visiting people in that county. Even my house, partial central is won't cut it. Because the central is somewhere behind my house. You put it on the structure, I think you should. I think you should put it near the access point, the main access. If that's the front door, that's where it ought to be. And the customer, the citizen, should be able to see that online on data, you know, on some sort of a web viewer, and you can call up and say, shit, we can't get in that way. It's like my older brother, nobody comes in the front door. Hey, that's his living room, now his bedroom. He's got a man room house. You put it on the driveway. If you live far enough back, maybe it ought to be on the driveway, or the driveway should be marked. Do you put it, you know, where do you put the address point? That's your choice right now. It may eventually be not your choice. What are some of the game changers? Text. You know that when you send a text, it goes just like that, right? And they get it just like that, right? Except text does not have first priority on sending the message. Text comes in after voice, and if it's a busy time, you may send a text when you see something. They may not get it in the command center for another hour, hour and a half. When you finish a phone call, you hang up. I expect y'all know when somebody hangs up. You get a message on text that they're through texting you? I don't. Yeah? Because they may sit there and come back with some messages you don't know. You have security, sufficient security in 911 center. Yeah. You know, everywhere. I'm talking earlier, what kind of system do you use? Phones move. A year or so ago, I was talking to one of the providers, and he said that when you make a 911 call, that location that goes in to the 911 center is where that phone is when you start the call. If they don't keep refreshing, you're still on the phone, you're following somebody, you're 5 miles down the road, but you show up where you made the first call. If it's a busy time, that refresh rate may not be going. And so you're saying, I'm following the crook, and they've got you 5 miles away or 8 miles away. That's an obstacle. I'm glad y'all are going to take care of it.
Well, and something else that's important to note, that is, today that call is routed on, the 911 center it ends up in is based on the cell phone tower that it got sent through. So, in my case, up in York County, we're so close to Mecklenburg County, there's 10 times the cell towers in Mecklenburg County. Most of our calls come through Mecklenburg County on the northern end of the county, just because that's where the tower had hit. In this world, it's going to route based on where that cell phone is. It's not just, you're not just talking about the address, it's talking about where the cell phone is when the call is placed. So, there again, it's going to rely on your GIS data to make that happen.
Any of you ever aware that in your county you've got cell phone calls way away? You know, if all the towers are busy in Lancaster County, they move then down to Chester County, down to Newberry County or Fairfield. We've had some of those calls show up in our place because the towers were busy. That doesn't scare you, it scares me. And phone companies, they're trying to get ready. Everybody is. And we're at the core of it. Alright, this part's easy. You know if you've got a GPS enabled cell phone, and you do. But your neighbors may not. My mother's cell phone has not been, her cell phone's as old as they've ever had them. I know a lot of other people like that. But if you use your cell phone, they know exactly where you are, right? Really? Well, according to the FCC, ought to be with the GPS, it really ought to be most of the time within 150 meters. Now, 150 meters, that's what, meter 6 inches? So that's 75 feet, right? not quite. It's a foot. 150 feet. It's more than 3 feet. Yeah. How far is 150 feet? That's a long way. That's 90% of the cost. 67% of the cost ought to be within 50. Oh yeah, that's dead on, right? Yeah. And 15% of your PSAP area, that's basically your county. You can exempt that. You don't even have to be that good in that area. Yeah. This is an old study. I used to work back in that time. 2013. Sorry about that. I'm learning to be retired. 2013 study in this backwards count state called California. You know, no technology whatsoever, California. 70% of the 911 calls were cell calls. That's about like most places. In South Carolina, 70%. An increasing number, not a decreasing number, of cell calls in California, and it is a significant increase. And in the San Francisco areas, the highest in the state, cell calls do not have and do not portray the correct location. That study is scary, and that's just a few weeks ago. Why? Well, it's technology. Cell phones give good information. The towers get hit too much. Tall buildings really mess things up. Triangulation as well as carrying the information is not working. York County's going to be okay. Gary will take care of it. Bill and David will sweat. We're the ones that can help fix it. This house, right here, that most important house on the north side of Atlanta, the most important, okay? That house, you make a cell call for 911 in the backup yard, right behind the house, and you say, desperately need help. Got a major accident, got an old granddaddy in here, and he's broken his leg, send help immediately. You see those stars? You could be making that cell call for any of those and get all the parameters for how close you need to be on the cell call. And that's if it's in the 90% or 67%. That many houses are dead on active.
You want a real life story with that?
Yeah, yeah.
About 2 years ago in York County, we received a 911 call a little after midnight. We could hear the lady choking just by herself. She dialed 911. We could hear her gasping prayer. We hit phase 2 on it, try to get location. We get the tower location. We don't get anything but the tower. 5 minutes into the call, we hit it again. Lady still gasping prayer. We called Verizon, who was their cell phone provider. They give us the billing address of the house. It's post office. So we start sending our City of Rock Hill police officers out at that time around the tower, hitting their sirens so we could hear it. An hour and 20 minutes later, we find her dead in an apartment complex. Just an apartment. That's real life. When you talk about that is how GIS can save a life. If we would have had accurate phase 2, we'd at least got close to the apartment. If we'd have had next generation 911, we'd have been in the apartment. That's where it becomes real life. And that's where we need you to be on top of it so that we can save that life. The lady was 56 years old. That's real.
We love aerial photography. We've all got, South Carolina, we've all got address points, pretty much. Yeah. You identify call location. You've heard Gary say what's expected. If Tommy was here, Tommy would tell you. Tommy's responsive. He and Gary would say pretty much the same thing. It's scary if you're out there in the front line, you can use this stuff. And Nina doesn't have all the guidelines. Everybody else doesn't. But we can step up and be there, and we make sure GIS is fixed for them. It's not enough, and this is the part that really gets me. It's not enough if we say our data's good, it's gotta be in the command center. It's got to be in communications central place so that they know they got the latest information. Absolutely the last thing done on Friday that is there if it has any impact on them. That's going to be hard for a lot of us. You've got to be sure that not only is your data up to date, but that you've got your adjacent counties' data up to date. And I laugh because that's hard to do. It's hard to just get the information from some counties, and yet you need it. You need to be up to date. You need to know who's going to respond depending on where the call comes from, how you work with them, and all that. Routing is not required for next generation yet, but it will be soon. It is expected, absolutely 100% expected, and it's just a matter of months, and somebody's going to say, "Oh, yeah, you got to have routing," and we'll talk about routing. You got to have every address, and it's got to be a good address. And, if I'm going to drive in your county, I sure hope you've got it nailed down tight.
If you want to go back to the prior
Yes.
slide. So far, Jack has talked about the fact that accuracy, how close you need to be to wherever the call happens to be. Talked about the kind of data that we need to be able to have in place. One of the things that's going to be also really important, because next generation 911 is going to be IP based, that means that any PSAP, any E911 center or 911 center is going to be able to support and take calls from other 911 centers. And that's why cross-jurisdictional boundary coordination is going to be incredibly important. And what that means is sharing data across the counties. And when Jack was talking earlier about the fact that we're stepping away from the system that's in place to this new system, and at 4:55 in the afternoon, if you make a change right now, it's going to be supported and you'll be able to find that location over the weekend. Well, at this point, if we're going to provide support across county boundaries, across the call centers, then that means that we have to have a mechanism in place that's going to allow for that data to be updated, that when I update my address point file, that the counties around me are going to be able to get access to it. And part of that is going to mean having standardized addresses, and Jack alluded to that earlier, and that's going to be incredibly important. And so having a common field structure is really going to be beneficial in that aspect.
What's going to be essential? Point addresses. I cannot imagine next generation without point addresses. And personally, I think it's going to have to be X, Y, and Z. If you're in an apartment, you're in a high rise, you got to have a Z factor. You got to tell high, so you can say, well, that's either the 5th, 6th, 7th, 4th. You can't go any other way. You got to have your streets. You got to do your streets right. I think we're going to have to go, like it or not. Certain fields have to be everybody's the same, or else all this update just isn't going to work the way it's going to have to. Routable. Hardest problem. I remember when Ralph and I tried to figure out what in blue blazes were we having to do for Marvelous to work, and how in the world, why do you call it Marvelous? We got to come up with how do you do this routing stuff and making it work, and it was just driving us crazy. And Tony talked to me, and I thought, I got it. But by the time I got down to Ralph's office, I didn't have it. And then talked to somebody else, on the team, yeah, I got it, and I didn't have it. Amy came by and looked at us and says, "It's not that hard, you're overthinking it." I remember where Ralph was standing, where I was standing, and she had a map, and she said, "This is what you do, you show the connectivity," because, you know, the way flat GIS works generally is, you know, roads cross interstates. Well, you can't go from every road onto the interstate. And you gotta make sure you go in the right direction. Well, it's real easy if you built your roads right and if you do it right. But if you don't, just saying, "Hey, I got good roads and you can ride on them," that's, routing is tough, and it's got to work if we're gonna move to the next generation of where we're going. And if you say, "Well, I think mine are pretty good," there's lots of people that can help you figure out, are they good? And once you find out, you say, "Oh, crap, we got a lot of work to do." And we were fortunate. We didn't have one-way streets in Lexington County, hardly anywhere. One-way streets can eat you alive. You gotta have your boundaries. Hey, you know, we get them from towns, and you do, and it's like, oh boy, wish they did it sooner, wish they did. But we're gonna have to get it, so it's right, we're gonna have to do it with the others around us. Every county's PSAP, it works. Nobody's PSAP ever goes down. No. And they've got a backup, and it works, yeah. But we're not, in the next world we're moving into very soon, you can't say, "Well, that county's down. They'll be back up soon." No, we're gonna have to cover. They're gonna have to cover for us when it happens, and it happens to everybody. You gotta have your response areas. Why do you have to have streams and lakes and all that? Because you can easily wind up in the wrong place, and you got a stream and you can't cross there. You ask our EMS director what else you gotta have, he goes through the list. You gotta have your soils. You can't do good EMS work without soils, because some people get trapped underground. And he goes through the cases. All the GIS, we're gonna have to be absolutely up to date. Aerials, I don't know how in the world you can do it without aerials. Aerials are important. They need to be good current aerials. You gotta have landmarks. The pink house won't cut it in Georgetown County anymore, but in every one of our counties, if folks from Aiken County come into Lexington County, and we say, "Well, you know, come to Lexington High School," and all we gave them was point addresses, they don't know where Lexington High School is. Yep, we're gonna have to have those landmark features that are the things, the critical points. And hospitals, yeah, go to the hospital in Aiken. I know where it is. Well, I knew where it was about 20 years ago when I drove by it one day. I don't know where it is now. And that's true for most of us with our surrounding counties, or if they came in to help us. It's got to be updated, local data. We've got to use the standards that are being prepared, and we've got to pray that all the software works. Are we ready? Sure, we're ready. ORS still helps a number of counties with regular updates or semi-regular updates. That's true. I remember it's been that way for years, and they do a terrific job with the counties they're working with. And those colors work pretty good today, right?
Much better than yesterday.
Well, that's why I went home last night and worked on colors because it's easy for that to wash out. And some people need help and some don't. But if you need help, and you think, "Well, I don't know, we haven't done much," call David. David Marson loves to hear from people. But he and his team will work with you if you need help. Don't feel like, "Well, I'm all out here by myself, and I can't do anything." They will help you. Call Tim. Tim said, "Call David, here's his number." But fortunately, we are in South Carolina to have that help. Here's people who have parcels and address points, and we're going to be doing some evaluation. We got to within the state. I don't know how we're going to do it, who's going to do it. I don't know when it's going to happen. I don't have any I just know it's got to be that we've got to evaluate some of the quality of some of the data somebody does. Because folks like Gary count on us, and we don't want to run the issue of, gee, we can't depend on GIS. Years ago, there was a county, local country, that the deputy sat at SCART in their big room and told me at that time, when 911 calls came in, they sat the car. Until the second call came from 911, say, excuse me, this is the correct address to go to. And I said, that's what you do. No, that's what all deputies in EMS do. The addresses were that bad. That's not that bad anymore. We'll talk about routable streets. Anybody? Talked about it a little bit.
Getting routable streets isn't going to be that difficult for each individual county. It's just going to take a little bit of effort. And just think about it from a procedural aspect. Just to get started, think about I've got all these road segments, and then I've got to tag all of them with additional attributes like speed limit, or if it's a one-way street, which direction it is, things like that. But in reality, you can do a lot of the stuff just by doing some spatial selections. You can go in and start having to be a municipality and take it as being 35 miles an hour, for example, or 25 to be more conservative. You can have everything else slated at 55 miles an hour, except where it happens to be an interstate, and make that 70. So you can do things like that just to get started, and then go in, like Jack had said, and take a look at where you have your overpasses and your underpasses, and address those. And that will get you started. Is it going to be perfect? No, but it's going to get you started. And then at that point, you can allow some of your first responders to actually QA, QC some of this data. Have them look at it. I live in Aiken County, and we have some dirt roads. I don't know if you all have dirt roads or not, but on some of those, no, Lexington is completely paved, 100%. And of course, you know you can't go 25 miles an hour on a dirt road if you want to be able to keep your vehicle on the road. So, you know, in cases like that, having somebody as a first responder who knows some of these areas, let them take a look at it, let them redline that map and mark it up, and then you can go in and make some of those changes. And this will get you to the point where at least you have an initial routable street data set.
One of the things we discovered as soon as we started running ambulances down routable streets was the guys in EMS started sending emails. That was far better than making phone calls. We tried that for years. Sending emails, and they would literally take pictometry, and you write on pictometry the images and send them to us in email and say, make this segment less than 1 mile an hour if you can. Because it was dirt, but it was bad. And so we'd make it as slow as we could.
Could you attempt to speak to the last one then? Do you have a plan yet to do that coordination?
Counties to counties?
Yes. He's got a plan on that.
I always have a plan. It doesn't mean it's going to work. So linking the counties around it as far as roads, is that what you're speaking about? As far as that's concerned, David Morrison's group did kind of a pilot project about 2 years ago, and took all the roads across the state from every county and stitched them together so that they were actually connected at the county boundaries. And found out that it's not that difficult to actually do that. It takes a little bit of time to initially set it up, but when you think about the number of roads that you have in your county that pass into neighboring counties, most of the time it's not too many, and you can do it fairly quickly. The problem that David's group, and he can speak about it as well, but I've also looked at it too, is the fact that many of the counties don't actually have real unique IDs for the road segments. And they might have the object ID or whatever happens to be generated by ArcGIS, but they don't really have unique IDs. Some of them do, but most of them don't. So that means that if we're going to look at having all of the data, or all of the roads from neighboring counties linked together, where it's going to come together and join with a routability aspect, it means you're having to redo all of that work over each time because you don't have those unique IDs to help you vary things out, where you can look at where you actually do have changes.
Also, in some areas, the data, in the same road, let's see, one or the other doesn't have different data. Those are issues that we're running into when we're trying to merge. You know, whose data do we keep when we do merge the state? Or, you know, so the county coordination is going to be at a premium. It's got to happen. Come up. And there were several places around the state that had that issue.
I'm sure Lexington does. We've done some work where we put some stuff together, and some of it very easy to do. Once we had about 4 or 5 people work on it for a couple of days. But we're gonna have to. That just means we're gonna have to spend some time with our neighbors, like our neighbors. You guys is one of the greatest fields you've ever found for people working together, and make sure we'll get a standard from the state. Here's how we do it. Here's what we've got to be sure we have. You've got Mecklenburg, but you already work with them, so that's easy. Well, sort of. Kind of like we are with some of our neighbors. These guys are working on it. I'm just a cheerleader. But I'm concerned because now that I am retired, I enjoy back roads, and I'm going to go through every county at least twice in the next few years. I got places I want to take Linda to eat that I used to eat, and things I want her to see that I used to see. That means I want to be in your county. I want your next generation 911 to be ready to rock and roll. Are your vendors ready? Some of them are. If I were in your county, I would at least have a conversation. I don't know that they'd ever listen to any of us in some counties, but at least have a conversation with whoever keeps the contract and ask them, is anything in the contract says anything about next generation 911? Because I can assure you, in most counties, the monthly payments that go to your CAD vendor are fairly generous. I know, I can tell you, fairly generous. We make GIS managers go beyond belief. They're also critical, mission critical. I don't know whether they say anything about next generation 911 or any of the other factors. But I had never heard of it. You're shaking your head, no, I didn't think so. Guys?
You really have to tie your CAD company down to get that in contract.
Yeah.
Because that's been a moving object for that CAD company because of the feds. The feds have moved those standards all around. Very hard to agree to a contract with a client when those standards have not been agreed upon, and they're moving targets every day. They change. If you said Routable's not in there today, could be tomorrow. How do you pen that to your contract if you're a CAD company?
I think Routable is definitely going to be in it. I think the address point's going to definitely be in it. And I mean, if you're sitting in Washington, why don't everybody have everything? You know? And that's not new. That's what it was 25 years ago with GIS. They cut out the napkin for the post office because everybody already had that. That's 20-something years ago. Cut it out. Everybody's got that. You buy it on a CD back then. Wasn't right. Wasn't everywhere. But that's why they cut it out. And address points, yeah, they've seen it somewhere. Everybody can do that. So we're going to have to do it. So what do we do next? I don't know. Some of it's going to come with these people. APCO and NENA are going to be making things known at the county level. Hey, we need this. We need this. In some counties, the administrator will listen to the 911 person and staff and say, yep, that's what we got to do. In some places, the administrator may say, well, I don't know if we can afford to do that because they don't know anything about how the money works. And every cell call, every cell phone pays now, including the ones you get at Walmart that you pay by the month. They now pay, right? Yep, everybody pays for 50 cents or whatever it is. Everybody. And that helps 911.
People get free cell phone service, they don't.
Okay, people, I don't go down there. I don't go down there.
There's even some new stuff with internet that just took place at the beginning of this year, that if you're an internet provider like Atlantic Broadband, et cetera, some of the federal money now is actually
Yeah.
being pushed into that, that if you look at your bill, it will go up. I don't know when in 2014, but it will happen, if it hasn't already happened.
There's a FCC's meeting next week, 20th, on location standards. I believe that's it. FCC, this is a hot thing for the federal government. It was not in previous iterations of 911. Federal government was sort of along for the ride. They are pushing this, and I'm not just thinking. I'm pretty sure this is going to be one of those. Why doesn't South Carolina have everything in place? And it won't be just South Carolina, because there are states where all counties do not have all roads named and addressed, and they're not 911, much less E911, which is scary. Tim and David are already working on, well, how do we get all these roads? You've heard the test. There'll be some, I'm sure other tests will say, hey, we're going to make this work. Maybe these counties can work together. I don't know. And here's a way that everybody can do it. We got to come up with standards. It's one of those. Hey, I was not in love 18, 19, 20 years ago with the idea of we've got to have standards for everything like that. Well, I've reached the point of saying, yeah, you got to have standards for this much information. Then you have all this other stuff you want out here. And everybody's got some of that, all of your other stuff. Fine, have all the other stuff. These you've got to have exactly the same. Will that do it?
Yeah, that would really help. We were looking at the address points across the board for all the counties, and some of the counties have all of the attributes broken out. Say, for example, the house number, street direction, street name, etc. And some of them have a lot of it pushed together into one or maybe two fields. And that is exactly how they need to have it for their particular E911 center in order for it to be processed. I talked to Dave Garber, for example, we were looking at his data, and he had a couple of fields like that where it was in a particular order, and another field where it would be in a different order. He said, for each one of my applications, I have to have this set up. And so that, you can still do that, like Jack's saying, but in order to help you prepare for the NextGen 911, you may want to go back and take a look at your address points and make sure that you at least have it broken out. And you can have it aggregated after that, but have it broken out as much as possible. That's going to help you prepare and be ready and be as flexible as absolutely possible, so that when it comes along, you'll be able to adjust to the NENA standard. Now, Jack has said about we would be able to provide some standards. We'll be looking at what NENA is doing from a national perspective. That's going to be incredibly important. Jack's been involved in their address standard project, and it has been a big pain. I recognize that. And thank you for that.
But it's been worth it.
Yes.
It's been worth it.
I just didn't tell you how much of a pain it was going to be.
No.
But it is very important. But what we're going to be able to do is provide that out to you all as a standard. But one thing that's important to remember is that when we're doing this from the state perspective right now, we don't have enforcement capabilities. We can't say, you have to do this. But what we can do is say, here's what I like to call it rather, is a guideline. Here's a suggestion, and this is going to help you be ready when it comes. So that when your 911 office contacts you and says, hey, you're ready to go, right? You say, yes, or almost. How do you need me to adjust these few things? The E911 office of the state has put out some guidelines for street center lines, and a lot of the counties, I'd say actually almost all of the counties, use some of the fields consistently. They all have the same data in essence, but it's just the naming of the fields is a little bit different. So that's already there, we just need to have one for the address.
I'm just curious, does the cap vendor in any way influence how the data is structured?
Yes.
Very.
So
Yes.
how do you deal with that going forward if you're issuing a guideline? And, I mean, I know like Collins looking at different cap vendors now.
Oh, they'll all work with you
How
to
are
do whatever you
gonna
want.
make it?
Yeah.
It's not their obligation to give you what you need. I mean, I think that's gonna be a struggle.
That's a
And
really
how are you
good
gonna work
question.
with these vendors to be able to structure it in
It's
a way?
very much, I think, what Jack just said.
Yeah.
And what Tim just said, you may have your data standard, and David Garber's gonna kind of deal with a different set.
Right.
And pass on to them. But I mean, we're talking South Carolina, we deal with, I'm not gonna name the city in California, very large city.
Mhm.
During UC, you're talking millions of address points, and at UC, we were helping them to resolve this issue, which was an intergraph CAD, and I will say that issue.
Yeah.
Where they had their addresses, but I'm gonna say close to maybe 10 to 20% of their address points were not working right.
Yeah.
You're talking that equaled about 200,000 to 300,000 address points that were off.
Well, I just
This
think
was
it would
in
be,
July,
yeah, I
so
just think it would be
that
helpful
was
if
all.
we had something to hand to the jurisdictions if they're wanting to start moving towards that process. And if they're looking at different vendors to work with, say, here it is, if you can't do this, we're not gonna go with you. And until we.
They don't do that. That,
No.
right?
Yeah, you're not gonna get a bid?
Yeah,
I mean,
here's,
Really?
yeah, here's what you do. You come up with what you've got to have to work with everybody
Yeah.
around you from now on. Then you come up with a separate set of fields, and, you know, Model Builder's built for this, right? I mean, this is what Model Builder was designed for. You've got your data, and then this CAD vendor says you gotta do it this way, so you
So you
create
restructure
that.
it for the CAD, then you have another set.
Yeah. And then 10 years later, you get a new CAD vendor. And what you've been doing is absolutely trash. He can't imagine anybody using that.
Yeah.
But you're still keeping your good data over
Yeah.
here. So you then use Model Builder and come up with how to spit out whatever this guy wants. And every CAD vendor I've ever seen says whatever you used to do with your data, that's foolish. I don't know what those do.
Well,
Seems like a lot of effort on it, you know, but anyways.
you're actually, you wouldn't, you mentioned having two different copies of versions
Yeah.
of data. You really wouldn't need to do that. You could have it all say in one address point file. You just have your addresses all broken out into parsed out
Right.
into pieces. And then after that, if your CAD vendor needed to have a field called ABC, and you had to have, say, for example, ESN or zip code, and then city name, and put in their complete address, you could say, okay, use Model Builder, you do the calculate, done,
Yeah.
good to go. And then that way, you just have one copy of your data, it's just how it's represented in that other field. And right now, as far as one of the things that we're doing to help get ready for NextGen 911 is that Gary, David, and I, and a few other folks are involved in the ESINet working group that just kicked off. And what we're doing is we're working with Charleston County and Spartanburg County and trying to come up with a model or an example or a pilot project on how they can work together jointly and what needs to be done. And so they're actually be able to respond to each other's calls on emergency when one happens to go down. And part of that is dealing with the data and the center of the layout and structures. And we'll be happy to share it with you.
Another thing that hits this somewhere is where's your data backup? And if you say, what's in server room? You don't have data backup. And if you never restored from your data backup, you don't have a data backup. I mean restored from zero to full data set. You don't have data backup. You may think you do, but you never know until you restore it. I used to work a variety of, well, I used to work for one county at least in South Carolina. We got into the data backup, and I think this is appropriate. We had 3 places we backed up our data regularly. We sent it, a copy to the city of Columbia, and we got a set of theirs regularly, and that way if something went down, it was routine, and you know, everything. We'd just hop over there and work, or they'd come over at our place and work. that just made sense. We then sent a copy of our data down to BCS, because we figured, hey, if the bridges go down, between us and Columbia, ain't nobody going to Columbia for a while. We'll go down to BCS and work. And made sense. We're kind of tied to them anyway, in a lot of ways, besides being Pleasant family. And if we can't go to BCS, if we can't go to Columbia, for years, we've had somebody completely out of the region or out of South Carolina that we send our data to. Just a complete set here. If we ever need it, we can't go to Aiken, and we can't go to Columbia, we may be recreating from ground zero, but at least we're not Valerie used to take care of that. I didn't. But you may want to think through this next generation. Part of the good part is you will have immediately around you some people with your data back there, but you'll still need something somewhere else. Any questions? This is all real simple. Any questions? This is in the sense of an awareness meeting session. It's coming. I was in college once. I remember that vividly. I dated 2 or 3 nights a week, sometimes 4 or 5 nights a week, sometimes 2 or 3 girls in one night. That was wonderful. Then I got engaged. You know how many girls I dated while I was engaged? Wow. Engagement was preparation for marriage. Everything changed. Think of this as your engagement before next generation. All that list of things you got to do, this better be on your hot list. And these people will make sure you know what to do or what will work best. And we have something that in South Carolina that most states do not have. I tickled to death when we finally got Tim to work with us in the state. But I remember even when he came, people said, he doesn't have authority. He can't do this. He can't do it. How's this going to work? How's this going to work? A friend of mine used to be here in the state, very active in Skark and Smack, and he moved out west. And he was in one of these states now where everything is GIS organized. Everything's organized. They got this state council, the state staff, and everything's organized. And we ran into each other, user conference. He said, I got to tell you, I miss South Carolina. I said, why? He said, in South Carolina, everybody works together. People enjoy one another. People support one another. People help one another. I said, well, you're in one of those states that's highly organized and everybody does everything they're supposed to do. He said, yeah, but nobody likes one another. And so they don't cooperate. They ignore requests and ignore demands that they're supposed to do. He said, South Carolina's the most wonderful place to work in GIS in the United States. I think he's right. I think we'll be ready. But we got to get there. Thank you very much. Appreciate you coming. Guys, I appreciate it.